Hello all, welcome back to another episode of the Enrich Your Journey podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Monahan. Thanks for being here with us today on episode number 21. I'm delighted to have a business partner of mine, Brian Fernandez. Brian is the president of Krilogy. Again, we're headquartered here in St. Louis, and I wanted to have Brian on the podcast today to talk all things family office. We have recently started a family office here at Krilogy, and it's a ever-evolving structure. It is growing in high demand, and I think it's a very relevant topic. And again, I'm just delighted to have my business partner and an expert in the field. So Brian, thanks for being here with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'll start as I always do. I want to give Brian's introduction, share his bio, and then kind of set the stage with what a family office is. As you all know, if you're a repeat a subscriber to the podcast, you know I love sharing stats, just kind of talking about what the topic is. So I'll share some stats about the family office, and then really just open it up to Brian about his experience, some of the strategies that he has implemented over the years, and really just see if we can kind of cover Family Office 101. Does that sound good?
Perfect.
Okay, I'm going to brag on you here a little bit now.
Appreciate that.
So Brian has 25 years of experience working in accounting, legal, investment professions, spending most of his career helping families and businesses navigate complexities and opportunities of multi-generational wealth. You'll hear us use that term quite often. He began his tax career at PricewaterhouseCoopers, practiced tax and estate law at the law firm of Hush and Eppenberger, and then transitioned to wealth management and family office profession. Today, as I mentioned, he leads, as the president of Krilogy, leads our family office, serving ultra high net worth families with their strategic plans, including both their financial and non-financial capital. We'd love to hear more about that. Brian's very involved in St. Louis. He's involved with YPO St. Louis, the St. Louis Sports Commission Board of Directors, the Scholarship Foundation of St. Louis, and serves as the alderman for the city of Sunset Hills. I feel like we could have a whole nother podcast about you serving as an alderman.
Definitely some complexity there, just like family wealth.
He is the youngest of 11 children. I feel like we could also have another podcast about that.
We could.
And obviously family is very important to Brian. Spends a lot of his free time with his wife, Julie, and their 3 children, likely on a soccer field, which I can attest to that. So again, thanks for being here. I want to start, if you're watching this right now and you're like, what the heck is a family office? Just want to break it down with a simple definition. And then again, I'll get into some stats here. There's a plethora of websites, ton of information on family offices. You could find the definition 20 different ways with a simple Google search. I just grabbed one at the top. This is according to Wikipedia. A family office is a privately held company that handles investment management and wealth management for a wealthy family or families, generally with at least $50 million of investable assets, so not necessarily net worth, but investable liquid assets, with the goal being to effectively grow and transfer wealth across generations. The company's financial capital is also the family's own wealth. Found this interesting. The term has been around actually since the 1800s. It was coined by the J.P. Morgan family and later popularized by the Rockefellers. So this is not a new concept, although in a lot of my research, I found that over 60% of family offices have been formed since the millennial. So the growth is dramatic there. Little last bit here, family offices manage a plethora of tasks. We'll throw up a chart here in a second. I'll get Brian's opinion on this chart, but this can be from property management, day-to-day accounting activities, management of legal affairs, family management services, family governance. That's a big piece I'm sure we'll hear more about. Financial investor education. Obviously, that's huge as you're dealing with numerous generations as well. Coordination of philanthropy and private foundations, and business succession planning. You can see this. We'll share a slide here now. Would love to get just a quick sort of your thoughts on this illustration. We grabbed this from the Ultra High Net Worth Institute, and I think it does a good job showing it's a very client or family-centric illustration.
Yes.
But as you can see, there's 9 arms of this flywheel or this fan here, and it really goes into how in-depth the services may encompass in a family office structure. I guess my question for you is, do you feel like this illustration does a good job of showing all the tasks that come up in a family office structure? In your experience, have you typically spent time implementing or addressing all of these things at this level, but then obviously at a deeper level as well?
Yes, and I think that's probably the most significant thing if you look at this is how many pieces are not actually related to do anything with money whatsoever. So the non-financial capital is not just the capital that we think about investing. It's things like well-being. It's about family governance. It's about decision-making. And that's what we found. You hit on something earlier, Pat, on sort of the single-family office, that concept. The newest evolution of that is the multi-family office. It's not entirely new. It's over the last 25 years. But it's taken that concept that if you don't have the wealth of the Rockefellers, but you do have significant wealth, a lot of these issues are common among these families, but yet the level of depth that each one might have an issue at a given time is very different. And so you don't need to be focused all the time on these. But if you look at that and saying, we need to be able to have skills and resources for all of this spectrum, that's really what leads to something as a family office. And it's really the depth and the frequency that you have to deal with those issues versus just kind of a one-off.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. And you see that in a lot of, when I was researching more about family offices, you do sort of see the theme. I would say it's less thematic about investing or rate of returns and much more about the well-being of the family. I think that's a big piece of it. And you see this in this illustration: health and well-being, family dynamics, the rising generation, leadership and transition planning, yes. Obviously if they're business owners. So it again, I think the illustration does a great job showing that, obviously investment management is on there. It's a piece of it. We're doing that every day anyways, but it's sort of just taking it maybe a little bit more deeper with the complexity that these families typically have.
It is, Pat. I think the importance is we look at this is really the business of the family's wealth. And so it's ironic to think you have to run a separate business once you've achieved financial success, but there's simply more complexity that goes along with it. And by definition, and you hit on a few of these, like it's hard to say what is a family office versus not. Single family office is very clear. It's structured for one, but we get into multi-family office, there really is a much broader spectrum. And when you look at the opportunity set really to have impact, if you go back to just what was basic financial planning, money investment, that was the original version of all this. Then it gets into all these other things we're talking about. We'll speak more on that. At the end of the day, if you have wealth and you want to transfer that successfully, you really do need to be intentional about these other areas. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, why did you work so hard to generate this? It's really to make sure that you're setting up your next generation as well.
So here's my stats to kind of set the stage. So the great thing is a lot of the largest financial institutions in the U.S. and even a lot of European ones, they actually conduct fantastic annual studies on family offices and the statistics around them. So it's very easy for me to find data, which I always find interesting, sharing the stats. Again, this one comes from Deloitte's private group. This is they call it their Family Office Insight Series. This is as of last year. And I mentioned this earlier, the number of family offices is projected to grow to more than 10,700 by 2030. I mean, we're talking 4 years away, 4.5 years away, which would be a 75% increase from today. Think about that in 48 months, plus or minus a little bit, a massive increase in the number of family offices, thus obviously the number of families that have that 50 plus million mark that need help. Mm-hmm. The estimated wealth of families within family offices currently stands at 5.5 trillion with a T in the U.S. only, and is expected to grow to 9.5 trillion by also 2030. That is a 189% increase. So you're going to have the number of family offices grow by 75%, and the number of family assets by just under 200%. It's just massive growth. I mentioned earlier a lot of that really just since the early 2000s. You can attest a lot of that, obviously, to just growth in technology companies, technological advances, obviously what the stock market has done. We now have a huge market of baby boomers selling all kinds of businesses. They've been head down building for many of years. Interestingly, and again, I know we'll talk about this, the influx of new money is changing the face of wealth, with most of family offices, including ours, managing not only the first generation, but second and now third. So you're really talking a pretty deep family dynamic there. There's a lot of benefits that you can read about with family offices. I think the one that comes to mind a lot is just efficiencies, economies of scale. Obviously, communication is a big one. Mm-hmm. I jotted down, families can achieve better. A lot of times there's cases that you can have increased investment performance because it's a very cohesive plan.
Sure.
Reduce costs. I mentioned that. Economies of scale. You're investing across a broad set of family members. And then a big one is enhanced privacy as well. So that's kind of the stats I'll share, and would love to open it up to you. Trying to think of some questions here right off the bat. I would love to hear, again, given your 25 plus years of experience working with high net worth and ultra high net worth families, do you see this structure continuing to grow as fast as these stats are telling us they will? And I'm curious why you think that is.
So I hadn't seen those stats or heard those. It's pretty remarkable, but I do think there's just an increased demand for services. I think one thing I believe that just societally we're looking more for the premium of time meaning something. And one of the issues with complexity of your balance sheet is that there's just more time that you need to dedicate to that and or decisions you have to make. And if you could outsource those, in particular, if you're outsourcing those to people that have greater competency than you might, or that you could put together, and people that have seen these issues multiple times,
Sure.
there's just a great advantage to that. So as a business model, that's one of the pitches in particular around multifamily office. If we've seen the same issue 20 times, 100 times,
Right.
we're going to get to an answer much faster.
Sure.
It may not be exactly the same, but at least you're a fingertip away from one of those other resources. So from that perspective, I do think it's going to grow. And I think importantly too, just all of us as service consumers are no longer content with just what are my investments doing?
Sure.
It became, more about a comprehensive financial plan. And I think now we're evolving that even more to the things you hit on with how do I bring in this next generation? How do I plan for them? And importantly, the work that we're in decisions we're making today really are about 25 years from now, 50 years from now. So if we're not thinking that far in advance and bringing in those perspectives, we're probably going to potentially make some mistakes in our decision making.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. And another thing I read too is we are getting ready to enter what we're calling, the marketplace is calling the greatest wealth transfer of our lifetime. You have all these baby boomers that have accumulated wealth, selling businesses. They've done well in the stock market the last 2-3 decades. And that wealth is literally in the hundreds of trillions of dollars in the U.S. That's going to be going primarily to Generation X and millennials. And that's where I think the generational piece of this component, this structure, is so important, because dad or grandfather, that's Gen 1, that may be, he may be the originator of the wealth. He or she may have zero interest in what Generation 2 or Generation 3 wants to invest in or what they're passionate about. What comes to my mind is cryptocurrency. I think of the younger generation is very interested in that, whether it's appropriate or not, that's besides the point. But dad or grandfather may have zero interest in that, know anything about it, not want to touch it because, maybe their wealth was from the manufacturing firm that they built all these years and sold. And so I think getting the family in one room and having that conversation on, it's not that anybody here is wrong, it's just that their passions, their goals are different at each generation. Right.
And Pat, if you look back over time, there's been a lot of work in this area, and there's still a lot to come because we're only 3 decades or so into that. What we've seen is, why does it not work when we're doing that? And frequently it is just the lack of communication, the lack of preparation, and then really just a lack of trust in that family system. And I use the equivalent. You said I'm the youngest of 11 kids. So that's a lot of complexity. But if you have 3 kids, you have 2 kids, there's a lot there too. And you bring in for that second generation, they may have spouses or partners, and they have some more opinions at the table. You need to create a healthy environment, because if there's one thing we know is it's challenging enough without assets and resources to pass on. Right. So money can be an accelerant in this situation. And the best way that we know to get ahead of it is let's have open dialogues, let's have communication. But by the way, you have to do it in a healthy environment and invite them into it. Otherwise, you're potentially creating a situation for even more conflict.
Yep. Love that. I think that's a good segue to, so we've shared, kind of the structure, the type of client, 50 million and much greater than that, typically 100 plus million, the services in depth. But I'd love to make it kind of relevant for listeners. If you're watching this, you're in that era or you're growing towards that, I'd love to hear, again, given all of your experience, just if you could share a couple concepts or cool stories, great success stories that you've been involved with that just sort of left you feeling gratifying that you're able to get that done for the family. Maybe it's setting up a foundation. Maybe it's helping Gen 2 take over the business. I think sharing those stories might be helpful in kind of making the family office structure relevant for the listeners.
Sure. And I think probably one distinction, because I struggle with this too, as far as is there a dollar amount or what exactly is that?
Yeah,
So
that's a good point.
it's really balance sheet complexity. And so meaning it can maybe 50 million and maybe 5 billion, I don't know, or maybe 25 million, but it's growing. So if I were to say one of the spots that I've enjoyed most is being really ahead of those liquidity events. And when somebody would look at us and say, I don't have even 5 million, Pat, to have you invest for me, but they have this business that's worth $100 billion. Getting in early and helping them think about that. Number one, there's some huge tax and estate advantages that you can get ahead of from that perspective. Some gifting strategies, things that press some of those assets outside of your estate. So that's critical. But the other part is getting them mentally prepared for it also. You mentioned sort of somebody that created this business, might be multi-generational within the family. That is a really emotional thing to do, to be selling the family business. So how do we get them ready for that? How do we find the right partner? Because the right partner might not be the max dollars. It may just be the right partner to be stewards of that business. But on the other side, that's some things that have just been really rewarding. Strategic philanthropy is pretty remarkable versus just writing checks to whatever you're used to doing.
Sure.
So people, and there was one woman in particular we worked with was going to give away all of her money to her alma mater, college alma mater. This was a lot of money. Over 5 years, we worked with her to work on that wealth purpose, to work on other values that she wanted. She ended up having a global impact with giving money away throughout the whole world, as opposed to just that alma mater. They got a fair chunk, so they're okay. Yeah. But the joy that it brought her and seeing just the impact she had over thousands of people versus people she might not ever see was really rewarding. Probably on the communication side, though, if you said baseline, that's where each family is very different. And so where we've been able to get in ahead, and we're frequently the ones sharing the balance sheet with the next generation. I'm not advocating for that, but sometimes there's a generational divide where that's just not comfortable. Mm-hmm. So being in there and actually helping them think about that. And by the way, you need to prepare them, because when you're sharing numbers, that's different with somebody that's 22 versus 52.
Sure.
If it's a next gen. So you don't always have to have the numbers as much as it's getting some of the preparation side in there. And the last thing I think from just what I've seen just work really well is you have to bring each child in their own way, potentially. When each child, that next generation, it may not be through spreadsheets. It may not be that each of those children even have a similar interest. So we've structured this well to say, okay, this one is going to need to have a very simple diagram and picture about it. How do we meet them where they are? Versus they may have another child that absolutely wants to see spreadsheet after spreadsheet. So how do we devise that? And I'd say this is for the next generation, but it's also maybe for the spouse of the generation one. How do we make sure that we're preparing them for ultimately what's ahead as well? Those are the things where after the fact you look at and say, I didn't know if it was going to work in the moment, but I'm so glad we did that work and to see that evolution. Because I will say it can be a multi-year, decade-plus approach working with these families to get them to that next spot.
Definitely. Thinking of something when you're talking through that, just the number of meetings, touch bases, you're actively, we meet with our clients typically quarterly, but then all the calls and emails that come up, obviously, as clients evolve. I would imagine the family office might even be more communication than Krilogy, I'll call core clients. Right. But it brings to mind, though, the importance of the relationship that you have with this client, because I mentioned earlier, the component of family office, a big part of that is also having really tight, enhanced privacy and confidentiality, yes. Right? Mm-hmm. And so you get to know these families very well, just as we do with all of our other clients, but you're talking to them so much, and they're making, a major change or decision in their life, even, a multi-million-dollar donation to an alma mater, you've got to do that in a pretty confidential way to make sure it's done right, it's done with integrity. I would imagine the communication piece and the confidentiality is paramount. Is that fair?
It is. And I think that's where if you kind of look and say each family has a different lens of how they want to protect that versus not. But you mentioned some too, even around like cybersecurity and increased security needs that family have has evolved over time. So one of the premises go back to where you started with the Rockefellers or the Morgans. The idea of the family office was you had a group of people that had your best interest work for you only, so you could trust them. It wasn't like you were being sold something on the other side. That's really what we're trying to bring to the table still. Our role is to be really in the center of all the other advisors, but also great collaborators with the other, whether it be accountants or the attorneys. Our role isn't to shelter them, it's to pull them in, because you hit it. We see them more frequently, we spend more time with them. Mm-hmm. Our job is to help issue spot and bring in others. And whether it's around sort of the privacy things, to know even simple things like, how is your second or third home owned? Is it in an LLC where it's actually anonymous, or is it actually your revocable trust and people know exactly where you are buying that? Or if you're entering some sort of transaction, those types of things, again, things that we get to see more frequently and be in advance of versus somebody that's just trying to go buy something may not be thinking the same way.
Sure. That's great. Curious if you can share some of the trends that you're seeing in the family office space. We've mentioned technology as a big part of that. I think about COVID, how a lot of our relationships went virtual. In my experience, a lot of families are comfortable with that relationship more so than they were pre-COVID. Is that a trend where you're able to help families that are, they might be traveling, they might have multiple homes? Is that a trend, or just, can you speak of any other trends that you're seeing in the family office structure?
So I'd probably say that the number one trend that's become just a necessary versus it was nice to have before was really all the work that we hit on earlier around family stewardship and learning, and really having the resources and skills to help train. That'd be your number one that's sort of beyond. There's a book called Wealth 3.0 that talks about it used to be money management, then planning. Then there was even a little bit of this work, but it was actually more from a fearful versus a purpose-driven. Now there's absolutely focus, and a lot of people are doing this, talking about it. The one thing I'd say, though, is we've done it for a long time. I feel like I've made a lot of the mistakes already, so I have a little bit of advantage there. But people will continue to get better at that, but that's a huge part of it. But really, the other component gets back to, you touched on multi-generational earlier, just really being focused that you want to bring G1 and let them know how important that is, and bringing in even spouses or partners on the other side of that to know it doesn't feel like natural. But if we're looking for ultimate success down the road, a passing generation, preparing these people to know really what are the table stakes to be a member of the family in a contributing way, you have to have those discussions during lifetime. It's not, a one-page memo is nice, but it's not real. You can't have that dialogue back and forth. And the other part of this, I'd go to the term, this is still a practice. We're out there doing this work, and it's not with, here are the 5 answers that we have.
Sure.
It's, we're going to try this with your family. We're going to see what fits. One small example, we currently have one where the spouse does not want to come in and talk to us about wealth, purpose, and values. They're scared of it. We're thinking, wow, what a missed opportunity if we don't do that. So we're actually pushing hard, and I'm going to have a lunch with this person just to try to ease them into what this might mean as opposed to something broad.
Yep.
But trend-wise, I'd say industry, that is a huge part.
Got it. Yep. Thank you for that. I guess a couple more here. We know there's a lot of wealth out there, particularly in this country. I think about, again, if somebody's watching this episode, they're sitting on a business that they are interested in selling. They may need to sell. It's time. Or they have inherited money. They have generational wealth. How do they know that they have potentially outgrown their current financial advisory relationship? Where they now are in this balance sheet complexity mode where, how do they know? I mean, is it just they don't know about all the services that they have? Curious if you can comment on that of, you got $50 million, but maybe it's coming from a manufacturing firm that you've built the last 30 years. And a lot of these things you've never heard of. Right now, you're just getting a investment management portfolio, right? But you might have significant and complex needs. You mentioned tax and estate planning being typically number 1 and 2 or 1A, right? Is there something that they should be aware of, or just kind of do a checklist or even their own research on, if they're not getting it, they should at least be asking these questions?
So I think, when you think about the multi-generational concept we talked about, one of the key elements is if your advisor isn't spending time thinking you through the next 10 to 20 years, whether it's $2 million or $2 billion, that's going to be some sort of sign that, are they really partnering with me to think through what I need next, not just what I might need right now, is one aspect to that. The other thing gets to that complexity I talked about. When you're entering those, somebody that runs a manufacturing company knows that backwards and forwards. The other thing that's going to be really hard for them is having a liquid portfolio that all of a sudden they have no control over. So working with somebody that's actually dealt with those transactions before and kind of getting them prepared for it, just mentally and emotionally what that might be, is a key part of that. But it gets down to, if you are looking forward and saying, I don't want to be responsible for every single one of these things when it gets to insurance on 3 or 4 houses or bill pay across all of those things, It's just there's a complexity level. And the last part is it becomes about the frequency of it. Maybe you've done estate planning, but at these levels of wealth, you're probably talking about it monthly, or you're doing transactions multiple times a year. Or it is that the level of complexity for your insurance is different because you now have multiple entities. You have a farm, you have a Florida property. Those are the things, it can just start to add up. And that's when you kind of start to have the sense like, I maybe need to bring in a resource. The challenge is this is an expense for a lot of people. That's a new one. They didn't have this before.
That's a good point.
And so that's where we get back to, it has to be a value proposition around saving people time, helping them make decisions that save them a lot of money in order to justify that. And that's in addition to all the investment things that we would do.
Right.
Because that's the one other piece that just as you get into our world, the more money you have, there's more investment opportunities. There's more structures you can get into. There's more private deals, which takes more research than just buying, a mutual fund.
Sure.
That's the other part too, to think about, okay, how am I going to make sure that I have the right team in place to do these things? And will that team actually have people that have done this a lot of times, not just the first or second time?
Yep. I think that's great. I think, I would summarize that, which was a great answer to, if you have that first feeling, or maybe you haven't felt it in a long time, because in my example, you've had a manufacturing firm forever, or even maybe the first time you're coming into inheritance, is, if you have that angst or that feeling of just being overwhelmed and not really knowing what your personal goals are, not really ever having talked to a professional about, I love the idea of like, what are my goals and aspirations look like in 5, 10, 20 plus years for my children and myself. And I think if you have that first initial feeling of being overwhelmed because there's so much liquidity in your life, maybe potentially for the first time, that would, in my opinion, be one of the very first boxes to check and say, I need to speak with somebody that has this type of structure, a family office structure that can help me with all of these things, not just the investment management piece that I've been getting, but estate. That's a great one. Like tax law changes, so it's ever evolving. I mean, we just went through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that changed estate planning and tax planning. If you're not aware of those, these things can make a massive difference in your life financially, and even, again, how they attribute to your goals. So I think that's really good.
They do. And one thing I'd add to that, so if it is a business owner, they've likely done strategic planning. They've thought through about their business. This is the shift. We have to start thinking strategically about the family and the business of the family's wealth in a similar way. Having a plan that we're held accountable to, having a wealth purpose and a mission to that then frames everything for us. And sometimes in business, we have to bring in outside consultants because they know they have a different lens on issues and can help us. And that's critical to us then growing. That's really what we're trying to pull together here as an opportunity for somebody to not be alone. I mean, we're an innovation and thought partner with them. It's pretty isolating sometimes to be making these decisions. It would be wonderful to have that team around you.
Yep, that's great. Well, one more at the end, I want to give you the opportunity to talk about the Krilogy Family Office. But before that just made me think of something too that I think is important. And that is a lot of these families that have built wealth, they're astute persons, they may have pre-existing relationships with professionals that they don't want to part with. I think that's really important. And the family office is not designed to say you're only going to use the professionals inside the family office,
Correct.
not the CPA or the attorney that has 10, 20, 30 years experience working with you and knows your family. It's really more about, we would bring them in and get everybody sitting down and planning together. But I think that's important, that it's not, you're not expected to relieve them of their duties, and they've been loyal to you and they've helped you all these years. It's, we might add to that. Maybe it's, we bring in our own CPA that works with your current accountant. Maybe we bring in an estate planning attorney because maybe now you have a taxable estate that maybe you didn't have when you worked with your estate planning attorney all these years. I think that's important for people to realize too.
It really is. And I think that's the importance for us as a family office, even from the investment side. It may be that you have $3 million sitting with a college roommate and they do bonds or something. That is fine. We're a collaboration of people. And so, yes, we want to be the one that has the full balance sheet to help you see that whole world on one page and help you with that. But if you have great partners, we're going to continue to work with them. Now, if in fact you've maybe evolved past that because now liquidity is too much, or your CPA or whatever is near retirement, then that's our job then to bring in other resources to help support them as well.
Yep.
But very much in a collaborative way.
Yep. Love that. So this has been great. Hopefully this has been helpful for you all. In closing, I'd love, we'll do the elevator pitch, right? I would love to hear about the family office at Krilogy. Obviously you're running that, leading that. have current clients. I know there's a desire to add more clients to that. Would love for you just to share more about the Krilogy Family Office for the group.
Well, the fun part is that we're creating this while we already have some existing clients, meaning that we're doing this work already. And that's critical. There's one very significant family we work with in particular that we cover the entire spectrum of needs. There's nothing we haven't seen or done. And what we're trying to do, though, is to still maintain that uniqueness of who Krilogy is. One of the things you are seeing in our space, like many, is consolidation. And so some of these firms are becoming very large. They will have great resources, but at the end of the day, this is a personal business. And
Absolutely.
I want to be there for the next generation and the generation beyond that. And that is our promise, is we're creating that. It's the family office for people who really want to be in that boutique family office world. Still, if you want to go for a big brokerage world of things, that's what's happening with a lot of this consolidation. That's fine. There's some good options there, but that's not who we want to be. So we want to do this for a select number of families. We want to continue to have the depth, though, of a firm that's very large, but still keep that personal nature. So the last thing we want is for you to grow a bunch of clients and all of a sudden you have to hand them off to somebody in Seattle or San Francisco, which the families are with you because of you, not because of something like that. So that's who we want to be, is that firm that can still maintain that personal touch.
That's great. Well, I know we'll have a long story history together. It's obviously, again, Brian's 25 years experience growing the family office and having a client right from the very get-go. I think that's a testament to your experience, obviously, what the family thinks of you. And I would just say, again, if you see this and you think you could potentially be a candidate for a family office, I know, having worked with Brian now, that he's easy to grab and just get his thoughts and his opinions on, if you are a good candidate, or even just to bend his ear on some advice. I'll include his information there. But just really appreciate you all joining us for the 21st episode. Hopefully you found it helpful. And again, Brian, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Podcast.
Enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Have a great day.